Hey everyone, this is Anthony Onesto, and this is New York HR. I can't believe what I see. He has come back from the dead. Steve Levy is back with us. Hello, Steve. How you?
I am fine, Tony from Staten Island. This is Steve from Long Island.
Did you get lost on the Merrick Parkway or something over there, or where were you?
That's Connecticut, you knucklehead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought isn't there a Merrick something over there, East Islip? Something.
There's Merrick Road. There's Merrick, New York. There's Merrick Boulevard. There's Merrick Street.
There you go. See.
Jesus God.
Well, I'm excited. Well, welcome back, Steve. If you're first time you're watching this show, we do a format where we ask our guests all about themselves. They talk about their experiences. We talk about innovation. We talk about New York and some hot topics around that. And then, of course, we end the show with pizza by the slice. So I want to welcome our guest
bagels
today.
By the baker's dozen.
Yeah, okay.
You just keep forgetting the basics of the show, Anthony.
Yeah, no. Maybe I want to. Let's stop talking. Let's introduce our guest for today, Yann Fiegel. Yann, what's up?
Hey, nice to meet you guys.
Good to meet you. Yann is really interesting. He's the head of talent for a company called Sidewalk Labs. He ran recruiting over at Oscar Insurance. So he has some interesting, he's got some good background. He's not a New Yorker, right? You weren't born and raised here in New York.
Well,
where are you from?
You can tell from his accent that he's neither from Staten Island or Long Island. He's from the he's from the very outer borough.
Yes, the very outer borough of Germany, they would say. I've been here about 3.5 years, and this is my 4th Thanksgiving coming up, so I'm getting used to it. I've already been saving space for lots of turkey later this week.
Nice.
Where in Germany? Where in Germany are you from?
I was born south of Munich, so in the southeast, and have lived all over the place. Spent the last about 4 years in Berlin before I then went to the UK and then came over to New York. And
in Berlin, Germany, that's where you cut your teeth on recruiting, right?
That's right. I started at a glorious firm called Michael Page. Yeah, I know. Spray and pray.
No. But you and I have friends in common. And I haven't even checked to see if we have them in common. But I'm certain that the three of us know folks from Michael Page.
Of course.
Sure. Yeah, an absolute training ground. I did that for about 2 years. It was really because I graduated university in 2009 and then went to Berlin. Looking for a job and this was the height of the crisis, so I couldn't get any of the jobs I thought I wanted, and saw an ad in the paper that said manager of tomorrow. I said, sign me up. I need a job.
So like everyone else with a liberal arts degree who couldn't find a job, you fall into recruiting.
Yep.
Right.
Bingo. Bada bing.
Bada bing, that's right.
Yeah, well, it's a low barrier of entry. I tell you that.
they take anything, right?
Yeah, especially.
Clearly, look at the three of us. I mean, come on.
So what'd you do? So Michael Page, you're a recruiter there. What'd you do for them?
Yeah, so Michael Page runs in what they call full desk, right? So you do both the sales side of the business and the actual recruiting side, and in hindsight, I'm really grateful for the toolkit I got there, because they have, I don't know how big they are today. Back then they were maybe 4,500 people or so globally. They have one script for everything that you got to do, and you gotta live by that script. And as anybody who's worked in an agency knows, right, you have to do this many calls or this many interviews and resumes submitted and all of that, which is always quantity over quality, but it works for them. And frankly, it forced me into some situations and forced me to do some things that I wasn't comfortable with.
Such as?
I had hired someone for a CFO. So the CFO had approached me. So I had this really complicated profile, didn't want to retain me, but didn't have enough jobs. So I went out and just looked through hundreds and hundreds of profiles and found one person, and put that person forward, spoke to the person, put the person forward, and long story short, he hired her and then came back and didn't want to pay the full fee. And I was like, I'm 23 and like I get it, and like I'll take something over nothing. And my MD, my managing director, was like, no, you're going back to this guy and you're telling him. And it was not a call I was really looking forward to, but I did it. And while the guy did not become best friends, I got the full fee out of it, as I should have.
Absolutely. See, we would have handled it differently.
Yeah, we would have sent some people over there.
Yeah, you're New Yorkers, right?
Yeah. We would have a couple of really.
Vinny Bag of Donuts and Vito Pots and Pans would have made a visit to this guy. And
how many times does that happen? I mean, Steve, you're in. I mean, you still do some side recruiting and contingency recruiting. I mean, that's got to happen a lot.
Well, I know I don't do the contingency anymore. Everything for me is upfront or on retainer.
Yeah.
But in all the groups on Facebook that are recruiting related, this comes up regularly. I mean, every month people tell stories about this, and the older grizzled folks tell them the same thing, Yann, that your MD told you, son. If you want to eat, you got to kill it.
Yep.
Exactly. All right, so now you go through recruiting boot camp. By the way, years ago, Robert Half, same thing. Yep. Everything was process oriented. You got to make this amount of phone calls. So now you decide to leave, and where'd you go after Michael Page?
So I did that for about 2 years, and you know what? I was a fine consultant, but I wasn't the greatest consultant, and I knew I was never going to be, and I knew that the value prop wasn't right for me. I was the guy that 2, 3, 4 years after I left that firm, candidates and clients still called in and asked for me, but I was never going to be the guy, right? It's just recognizing, I think, also what your strengths are and what you're not, what you're able or willing to do, not willing to do. So it was clear I was looking for something else, and found this gaming startup in Berlin as well, who were the first and of really 3 companies in a row where I came into a fairly similar situation. That's hindsight, obviously, talking, because I didn't realize all of that at the moment. A gaming startup. This was at the time when the Facebook games were really big. A company called Wuga. They had a few titles, had built a good business on this, on that basis. Were about 100 headcount and had a fairly young, immature recruiting function. And a few people there who've been doing this and have been doing a good job, but all of a sudden they needed to scale. And I came in as a contributor and just helped, tried to help where I could, and helped them. I think it was something like 180 hires in 14 months or whatever. So it was like a lot of growth, figuring out how to do that, not only how to deliver candidates, how to deliver an interview process that works, how to scale all of that, because as we all know, it takes a lot of time to do all of this. It was interesting too, despite that being a small company, we truly recruited globally. So we hired people from the US, from Canada, etc. Even though everybody was Berlin based, so that was fun, and I certainly learned a lot. Had also a leader there who really, I think, supported and promoted me in many ways, and so that was a really good and fun experience. Not least, by the way, working in games is fun, because people that go into games doesn't pay well. It's long hours, grueling work. But the people that do it, they love it.
Yeah.
They love creating. They live for it. It's the best thing that the thing they've always wanted to do. Even the people that I worked with now have gone to start so many other companies. It's really insane and exciting, and it's a great industry.
Well, it teaches you the agility of regular software updates, the rapidity of it, and literally you have to add new features and ameliorate your bad features regularly, or else it'll be yesterday's game. So I'm curious, how would you, and I suspect you probably didn't do it, it was probably more by chance, but how did you assess someone for their ability to be that kind of person in that kind of organization? Both a performance fit and for lack of a better word, because it'll probably make me chuck, a culture fit.
Yeah, good. I think you and I both feel similarly with culture fit, right? Whatever.
Yeah,
that
we talked about that when we first met, if you remember. So, but how was it more just happenstance?
Yeah,
luck?
I think you can never fully exclude those. I think the thing that stayed true for me, and the longer I do this, the more I believe in it. Any case study, any role play, anything that gets you closer to what people would have to be doing on the job is so much more predictive and frankly easier to gauge as an interview than trying to make something up. So very simple, right? Like one of the roles that's really unique to the games industry is a game designer. This is somebody who has to think about how the leveling up system works and has to potentially, come up with a mathematical statistical system so that when you progress across all the levels, you keep progressing at about the same rate.
And when to buy up, when to charge my son or my daughter's, game buy purchases. By the way, that is so foreign to me as a gamer from the 70s and 80s, right, Steve? I mean, we were just like, boom,
like this. It was Pac-Man and Tetris.
Right, exactly, or Pitfall. You would just fall into the. It was just, but there was no buying up. Like it's great. Like here's the game for free, and then by the end of the day, you won level 20, and you just spent $5,000 on a video game. It's insane.
That's right. And the economics of it, though, are working really well. I mean, the few companies or games at the top of the Apple Store charts make insane amounts of money.
Crazy. I mean, even the independent. There's a guy that I know, and he, he's nowhere near the 100th on the Apple Store, and he's probably pulling in about $100,000 a month on various different games, just ads and then buy ups and all that sort of stuff. So it's crazy. Never. I wish I could have bought up in Pitfall. I would always get in that alligator. Anyway, I'm dating myself. All right, so now you're doing all this stuff at what happens after the gaming company? What happened to the company? Did they get sold or did they close up?
They're still around, and I think they're doing well, but they're not scaling anymore. And the personal backstory to me being here is that in 2006 on a bus in Guatemala, I met the woman who today is my wife. And she's a U.S. citizen, and we met still in college, and we did long distance for a really long time. But she went back at some point, so it's clear I was gonna follow her about a year later or so. And the company stopped really growing in the same pace, so it was actually a fairly natural transition out. And as the beautiful U.S. immigration system goes, it took in total about 20 months for me to get my green card. And so to bridge some of that time, I went to the UK. To a company called Natural Motion as a consultant. They had a need they wanted to fill. And it was, funny enough, it was again the same story, about 115 people, a few studios, needed to grow headcount pretty quickly. Also a German founder, weirdly, because the same thing was true again at Oscar. So that's, I don't know how that happens. And I did the same thing there again. Huh?
We know how that happens. We know.
Yeah, I know. It's like a secret German. No, there isn't. That's the.
Yeah, there's a secret German network.
I wish there was.
No. We don't talk about secret German networks, Anthony.
I was waiting, Steve. I was waiting for you.
No. Okay, fine.
Yeah, and so did that in the UK. And you know what? It was interesting, because on the one hand, I always think at the core, good recruiting work comes back to the same principles. Run a tight process, put some thought into the stuff that you're doing, really drill down on what is it we're trying to get at, work well with your hiring managers, treat the candidates well, and. But at the same time, I think in the UK, it was quite obvious how some dynamics were just different, right? So like in Germany, as a standard employee, you have 3 months to the end of the month notice. Regular employee.
Very different in the UK.
Very different in the UK. Very different in the US, especially. Right?
Yeah.
We're now going to Canada. Even in Canada, the rules are again different. Mm-hmm. And it creates a different fluidity on the labor market. Right, things are moving much more slowly, etc. And it was also rejecting candidates. In Germany, the kind of routine and the expectation was if you were going to get rejected, I was going to reach out to you as a candidate and say, hey, do you have time, blah, 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 and we get on the phone and I tell them. And I did that in the UK and people got pissed. Like, why are you wasting my time? Why? I mean, fine, I'm getting a rejection, fine, whatever, but why did we have to schedule time for this?
Huh. So they prefer the email or the notice or something.
And so that's one of the things that I've certainly kept in the US as well.
Interesting. So now you're over there in the UK, assuming you're waiting on the green card process. You get a notice, hey, you're approved. Now you're
off. I went.
Off you went. Now, did you have
honey, let's get married now.
What's that? Sorry.
Then it's like, honey, it's time to get married. Although you could have gotten married beforehand and saved yourself a whole lot of time.
You have to. We were married, and it still took. Well, it's not. It was. I think the process itself was 11 months, but then you can travel, and then it also it was all fun.
Okay.
Now, did you have the Oscar job before you moved?
No, this was again like an interesting experience, right? So at that point, I felt like at least in European tech, I'd built out somewhat of a network and I had a few contacts, etc. And I felt relatively confident that I could translate that over to the US. And as we all know, the application process is broken. And I spent, it wasn't even that crazy, but probably over 6 weeks, I sent out something like 50 applications. And I got 0 responses, 0 invitations.
Wait a second. Wait a second. You sprayed and prayed?
I didn't spray, but I understand that you have to reach out, right?
So wait, let's spray and pray. What does that mean?
Spray and pray is when the job seeker believes that I will apply to 50 jobs, 100 jobs. Oh, look, no one's getting back to me. They must not be hiring. I think the economy is in a downturn. It certainly can't be me. Something like that?
That's right. Well, so it was obviously one of the tactics, right? But it was interesting because you're in this business yourself and you go through it as a candidate, and I understand why, right? I get it. At the same time, I had little network to build on, and I actually, I used what I could, but it took some time to figure out, and I used some of the VCs and some of the founders I knew in Europe who had connections over to the US. Through that, got 2 specific introductions that turned into 2 job offers, which is just an this is 1 8-week period. So it's not, I don't know if it's statistically significant to be the truth, but clearly for me, it's all about the networks. It's all about the referrals, even at a much lower number, right? So that was an interesting confirmation of something we certainly all talk about.
Of course, Yann, it could have just been simply timing.
Yeah, it all happened at the same time too, right? It's not that I did the one first and the other one second. It was all in parallel.
Yeah, it's not like you prayed to the church of the sister of the holy job seeker or something like that.
Right. Is there's a sister of the holy job seeker?
I did that for you. I made that for you. Made it up for you.
I appreciate that. Okay. Amen.
It was in tight.
So you got 2 offers, assuming one of them is Oscar, right?
Yep, that's right.
So can we ask what the other one was, or is it confidential information?
Are they still around? How's that one?
The other team's still around. 2 fantastic, very young founders. Oscar, frankly, just had a mission that spoke to me more, and they were also at a different scale. They were already again at like 100 people or so, and the amount of work seemed quite more interesting.
And if I recall, the founders are a little more mature than just your usual startup entrepreneur.
Yeah. So the founders are Josh Kushner, who runs Thrive, and Mario Schlosser, who's still CEO. Both in their own ways incredibly capable. There's a third guy too who's great, and that was just fairly impressive. And like the call of taking on U.S. health insurance and changing that system for the better was quite something.
Yeah, I mean, you're going up against industry that has been, there's a legacy of it. I mean, there's a ton of big companies that don't want to see you succeed. You're trying to disrupt. I mean, I know that has become somewhat cliche in the startup space, but so now you're coming from the UK, you've worked in Berlin. Now you're with this US startup that's trying to disrupt the health insurance industry. So it sounds like, did you lean on purpose a lot to attract folks? What were some of the challenges, working in a startup in New York? Now that Oscar, New York, so now you're in New York full time. What kind of challenges did you see that were different than you saw in the UK or Berlin?
The thing, so a number of things. One, for a long time, I believe that recruiting and doing recruiting well is about method, And it is in many ways.
Well, what do you mean by method? Double click on that.
The way you go about it, your work, the way you set up your process, the way you handle yourself, handle your candidates, the tools that you use. Recruiting is a process, right? You need to put people in at the top of the funnel and they fall out at the bottom somehow. And realizing, I think back then, how much catch up I had to do because I didn't know the ecosystem. I didn't know the place. I had a broad understanding of some of the companies around, but I can say this now that I've been here about 3.5 years and I've spent a fair amount of my time networking and trying to meet people. The ability now to tap into that, to say, oh, can you, back channel someone for me, or do you have advice, or knowing what's going on where, which companies maybe to target for something, where to ask. All of those things are tremendous value, obviously.
Now, it's funny you talk about process, but and that is something that when people talk about looking at coming into a new organization and looking at what they have, they focus, it's process. Want to make sure the design and all this stuff is good. But just imagine running a like a Ferrari or a Porsche on ethanol, or not ethanol, on like corn fuel or like regular gas.
Yeah,
you're going to have some problems. And I wonder why folks don't talk more about the people, the quality of the people going into the process versus focusing on the process, the metrics, the systems, and then rarely, or until it's very late, talking about the people that go into it. How did you again, because here in New York, both Anthony and I know of Oscar. We know about the growth. We saw all the placards on the subway cars. How did you go about making sure that you're actually fueling the process with the best people possible?
It's a great question. I think it's actually I think that speaks to one of the challenges that recruiting has fundamentally, right? There are millions of people out there that we could message. There are hundreds that we could all interview, and in one way or another, right? Like, I think at the end of the day, when you recruit, you need to go somehow from a large number of unknown people, unless you happen to know them, they come in your network, their referral, whatever, down to here are the right ones. You need to get a conviction, and we're all trying to figure out how can we make that process more efficient. And there's a number of components that make that difficult, because what we believe makes someone successful isn't necessarily really what makes them successful.
Yeah.
There is some pre-screening and pre-vetting that you can try to do, but only if your brand is strong enough to make people jump through all those hoops at the very beginning. You can lean on what are other proxies, like you just look at people who've gone to Harvard and MIT. You can do that. It again has a number of drawbacks. It's probably not the smartest strategy, or whatever else it is, right? It has worked at X other companies.
Yep.
And so I think that's a really interesting one. There's this book, The Rare Find, that looks at all the methods that are being used in sports, in the military, to think about that vetting process and how to do that more effectively. I haven't seen a perfect solution yet, to be honest.
Well, Steve, isn't the solution go find me another Steve Levy? Isn't that?
I pity the fool who uses that as an approach, but Yann and Anthony, that really is what it is. That's Anthony, he's our best software developer. I want more people like him.
Yeah.
And so but the drawback of doing referrals, 100 companies, a lot of folks say I want most of my hires to be referrals. Well, there's a saying that says incest is only relative, and so if you get too many of the same people, you're going to create products and progeny that are deformed, because you're in fact not being more heterogeneous. You're actually being more insular and more homogeneous.
Yeah.
That's we talk about building personas, and I have mostly a love-hate relationship around personas, because your personas are typically generated from the people you have right now, not the people, not the organization you want it to be.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. And talking about tools and some tactical things, I'm, you know, I think Lou Adler has a number of real gold nuggets in the stuff that he's written, and one of the ones I find incredibly powerful, and I keep talking about, and it's I don't think it's anywhere near as widespread as it should be, is stop writing job descriptions as a profile of a person and start talking about the deliverables.
Well, just so you know, but and you know, Lou and I have been friends for 20 some odd years, and we're both engineers.
Longer than that, by the way.
No, I don't think longer than that. Yeah, you're a jerk. But you know, we're both engineers who crossed over to the dark side.
Yeah.
And actually, and you're gonna love this, Ernesto.
There it is.
Our hometowns are next to each other.
Of course.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you know, we're talking about that now. It's the same guy. It's the meritocracy.
Now, Lou is good. You know, performance-based hiring. I actually, we independently called it something else, and many years ago we connected, and Anthony, you know, we've spoken about that many a time about assess what you can, interview based on what you can truly assess.
Yeah.
So
what has really changed in recruiting? Nothing has changed. Nothing. We keep thinking we're getting the same, insanity, right? The definition of insanity.
The thing is, Anthony,
job descriptions are the same. Recruiting's the same. Everything.
Well,
you gotta fundamentally just get rid of everything.
But the thing is, recruiting in itself is not broken. He likes to think that recruiting is broken. If you automate more, you give people more apps, you do more analytic stuff, magically it'll all be different.
Yeah.
You survey.
You're in New Yorker now, Yann. What do you think of that?
The biggest challenge that they've had. It hasn't changed in 20 years. No one's doing anything differently. It's just. Anyway. But I agree with you. Yeah, Yann, there was a time in my life where we were recruiting for software engineers to do video on mobile phones. I know it sounds like second nature these days, but there was a time where you couldn't do that. It was very hard to do that. And the guy that figured it out wasn't even a high school graduate. He was a guy that would come in at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know what he did at night. I'm sure he was doing some sort of hallucinogens. But all these guys that we had from Carnegie Mellon and Georgia Tech and all these folks that we hired, these smart.
You have to pronounce it's Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon.
There you go. Teach him something new. But you're right, though.
Yeah, he was the guy that figured it out.
Many of us who like Lou and I, we're engineers. GPA doesn't predict anything. All you can do, the only thing you can do with GPA is pretty much say with certainty that the person who has a high GPA probably spent more time studying and probably had a less time drinking beer.
That's very true. All right, so we digress. So now you're out of Oscar, and we'll talk about Oscar, but I want to get to what you're doing now. So now you're with Sidewalk Labs. Really interesting group that you're working with now. Tell us a little bit about what they're doing. You want to talk about purpose. Yeah. What a really interesting organization you're working for. Yeah.
So Sidewalk Labs is a company that was started about 2.5 years ago. It's really the brainchild of Larry Page and Dan Doctoroff, who's our CEO. Dan
Doctoroff, for our audience here, was associated with Bloomberg for many years.
That's right. So,
and who's Larry Page?
that's
no one.
Another conversation.
No one.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, Larry.
Come to Staten Island. The idea really was that you look at where people live today. You look at what the projections are. By 2050, I think it's 60 or 70% of the world's population is predicted to live in cities. You look at how cities are doing today, and they actually have a lot of challenges. You have a lot of people very close up that can be very powerful. It can also be a lot of trouble. And the way that cities are being created today, that they're being built, that they're being managed and operated, and as well as they're designed, is a very disaggregated process. You have a lot of different players, but they don't really have a mechanism or incentive to come together. And that, among other things, means you have an inefficient process, and technology doesn't play anywhere near as big of a role as it could. And that was really the insight, the idea behind Sidewalk. And we're now 2.5 years old. We've spent this time coming up with a vision that we think is compelling for how you could build, operate, design cities in a better way. We've incubated a few companies that we've spun out, a healthcare company, a mobility-focused company, invested in a few companies. The big thing that we announced about a month ago is we're partnering with an agency in Toronto in Canada to build a new neighborhood, which ultimately, hopefully, is going to have the size of really almost Midtown Manhattan, to hopefully show that there is a better way to create community, to create a place that's vibrant, that people can afford, that's sustainable. So it's certainly a very, very big vision that we've set out to accomplish. And for my role, in the talent role, that's meant, I came in at about 35 people. We're now, without the companies that we've spun out, about 75. So that's certainly still a lot of growth in the 14 months or so that I've been here, but it's still smaller, and it's much less of an operation as it was at Oscar, right? So at Oscar in 2015, we hired 500 people. 320 of those were customer service reps. So we went from 140 to so many more. And this is in many ways a lot more bespoke, a lot more specialized. Right now, I'm in the middle of a search for somebody, world-class thinker on urban mobility. That's cool. That's a job that exists nowhere. So you have to figure out where to even start to look. How do you, as we talked about just a second ago, how do you know whether somebody's good for a job that hasn't existed before, that nobody's done? So it's actually quite interesting, but it also means that I've really had to switch my perspective on what successful recruiting looks like quite a bit, where, again, Oscar was a lot about scaling, operations, structured interview process. I talked about that a lot, and I still think that's important. But I've come to also learn over the past year how important it is that you're aligned with the hiring manager, with the key people, that you share an understanding of what it really is you're after, that you're going through the search process together. Because if I go off and I talk to 25 people and tell nobody about it and then just say, here are the 5, I haven't taken my stakeholders along that journey, right? If that all of a sudden just comes out of the blue, how are they going to know that these are actually the best 5? So that's
even better with that. When you teach your stakeholders about what the journey looks like, and how to actually travel along this journey, they become not only the advocates, but they become surrogates of you, and they're always out there looking for people who, hey, Yann, look at that! I met this person. I'm not sure if they're great, but I was really impressed. Can you give them a call?
Yeah.
That's in recruiting land. That's manna from heaven.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, this is, I think both sides of this are true. You need an efficiently run operation, but also, at the end of the day, most of the time, the business we're in, unless it's Michael Page, the job of the business is not recruiting. We are there to enable a business to be successful. And so if I'm not aligned with my hiring managers, it's not going to work.
So how are you going to find this job? Like, take us through, obviously if you have competitors out there, obviously be wary about what you're disclosing, but take us through how are you going to find this job? If this is a job that's not well known, how are you, like, what tactics are you taking to go find this role?
So, great question. I think
incidentally, if you name things and people, try to push people on you, tell them to talk to us. That's not good. That's not going to go well.
Unless they're good.
Well, then, even then, I'm no.
No. Steve wants a referral. That's why.
No, I don't. I couldn't give. No.
Stop it. What are you getting all sensitive for? Good. So what tactics are you taking?
So, again, it's this idea of let's try to be as clear, aligned, and intelligent about what we're actually looking for, right? So with a role like this, it's very easy to come up with a unicorn description of all the things that they already must know and do and whatever. And then I think the more effective way to do this is to say, over the next 12 months, what do we actually need this person to get done? What does success look like, right? Define success on the job. Don't define.
Taking the Lou Adler approach, let's figure out what the results are first.
That just adds a clarity to what you're trying to get at. Because again, this job doesn't exist. There's no education for it. There's no one similar job that somebody's done before. There are elements of it, and that's kind of the next piece of figuring this out, right? So we know I've kind of broken it out into 5 different pieces that we think are important. So it needs to have, of course, an insane domain expertise, needs to be able to drive and articulate a vision, needs to know how to operate in a business context, needs to think about urban mobility as an urban values question, something that needs to benefit the public, not just as a business model, and a few more. And so you spell that out and you say, well, where does that live, right? And so for this particular search, you could look at public transit officials. You could look at people who have started new companies, like Travis Kalanick is looking. I don't know if I want to, but you can start to piece that out and put out a full spectrum, and in between. And of course, no individual person's trajectory is just one of those.
Hey, Yann, I'm curious. Have you looked at the City Age events yet?
City Age?
City Age.
No, I haven't.
Go to washington.cityage.org.
And so someone, I mean, Steve would love to recommend someone from the NTA here in New York.
No.
Whoever runs the subway system
Anthony,
here in New York.
Anthony and I, many moons ago, I told Anthony that the greatest barrier to growth, business growth in New York City is our failing infrastructure system. And he said, nah, you're so full of nah, not at all.
Well, actually, I was bored with it, but yeah.
Okay, well, that too. But, we've been,
right.
when you look at building something here in New York, we always tend to focus on the sweet smelling parts. Oh, we've got billions of people and everyone wants to come here. What are some of the greatest barriers to building a company here in New York?
I think it's a good question. So I think, first of all, New York's an amazing place to be, especially right now. I think there's a ton of reports out there. I think I just read it's now the 2nd largest ecosystem in the world, measured by number of startups, I think. And so there's a number of ways you can cut the data, but I think one thing is true. New York's become a real ecosystem for startups. And at the same time, if you read up, there's this guy called Matt Turk. He's a VC. He wrote an interesting piece on New York tech ecosystem catching up to the hype. That he says it's kind of in the 3rd cycle. And you look at Silicon Valley, it's obviously like, I don't know, the 7th or 8th cycle, et cetera. So you need a number of iterations to actually have enough talent and experience and people who've been part of an IPO and an exit and who've done it before and who will put the money back in, et cetera. And so I think some of the hardest things are the competition for talent inside New York, and some of the hardest searches are the ones where you really need people experienced in tech that you just simply can't find here. Where there's maybe, if you try to run a high-level VP Eng search, you're going to have a really small pool of people who have just gone to a certain scale and have done certain amounts of work, and then it's really hard to pull people from the West Coast. I think that's one, and I think the market itself is competitive, but I don't think there's any place in the world where there's not fierce competition for software engineers or recruiters, by the way, which is also a pain in the ass to recruit for. So I think those are some of the things. I don't know what to make of this, by the way, of this this tax thing that they're talking about, making you pay taxes on the money that you're investing. I don't know if that's even made into the final proposals, but that would be
Well, all that's driven by what's taking place in Washington D.C., and we still have no idea what's going to come down the pipe. But one way or the other, something is going to change.
Yep.
And that may or may not take away any advantage we have here in New York in terms of reasons to stay here.
Yeah.
So how has the recent rule in New York to not ask, or you can't ask about previous compensation, has that affected you at all, or have you had to adjust to that at any point?
Yeah, I mean, of course we've had to adjust, right? Because there's a very clear way that you need to adjust by stopping to ask certain questions. I think you both have debated this question vehemently too.
I don't know, vehemently. I think we both think it's a dumb
If
question.
I knew what that word meant, I'd agree with you, Steve. But
Go, you know, is there a library on Staten Island where you can get a dictionary?
I'm gonna get this.
That's right.
Hey Siri,
Silly me.
Vietnamese.
It's been interesting to deal with. Of course, it makes it makes it a little bit more cumbersome for somebody who's been trained in the agency, right? And you're like, your training, your core training tells you that you need to try to know everything about the candidate before you give them the actual offer and. But at the same time, you can still do it. I think like the reality is, you can still ask a question. People still give you their expectations, and then you work with that as much as you can. And you know what? What's happened to us is we've made an offer to someone that we thought was great and competitive, and turns out we came in below that person's current base, and that was stupid. And, you know, I wish that didn't have happened. But you know what we did? We said, very sorry. You know, don't take it the wrong way. We made the best call. We thought we put our best foot forward given the comp structure that we have. Let's talk about how to resolve this. And we resolved it, and it's fine.
By the way, that brings to mind, you know, one reason why this salary question creates havoc for companies is in fact internal versus external equity.
Yep.
And you know, clearly we all, you know, as much as we make fun of you know, folks who run for government or in government offices, not a single one of them knows about real work and real jobs and all the stuff that we, you know, they don't even know the laws that they don't know the laws that we have to structure our way of thinking by.
Yeah.
But yet they can tell us how to do things.
Their salary is also public.
Their salary, yeah.
Yes.
Steve, you sound amazingly libertarian just now. Oh my!
I didn't say I wasn't. Yann, Andy and I.
Actually, Facebook told me something. So, all right. So we're butting up in the hour here. So we're gonna anything you want to talk about? What's happening with your company? Anything you want? You know, if there are any jobs that you're having a difficult time recruiting for? Anything? We'll leave that open for you.
By the way, Yann, you can check your inbox. I sent you something.
Awesome.
We can discuss after.
I saw you working over there when your head was.
I'm seriously multitasking. I'm doing several types.
You know what they say about multitasking?
No, well, what do they say about multitasking?
I have no idea. I'd be multitasking if I told you.
Yeah, fine, sure.
Let me finish writing that email. I'll answer your question. I'd love to ask you guys a question, to be honest.
Can't do it. Unacceptable. Not good.
Yeah.
Why is there no tech tool out there, recruiting tech tool, back to your debate earlier, that's really actually solving something? Maybe.
Well, Yann, there really are.
That's another show.
That's a whole nother show. And if you have time after we finish this recording,
yeah,
you know, let's do another hangout and I'll show you several.
Awesome. I
have an opinion. Shocking. Look at when you go to all these tools, look at the founding teams and the leadership teams, and tell me how many of them either have the domain expertise that they're in the business of doing, or any sort of user empathy whatsoever. And if you tell me that there's more than 10% of those companies that have those people in there, then I'd be shocked.
I'll
problem with HR technology.
Well, I'll agree with you, and I'll throw one other thing at that, and maybe we'll get some HR tech folks to have this.
I hope we're raising the temperature here.
But in addition to what Anthony just said, look for look for people on the board of advisors who are actually doing it.
Yep.
In present day, down in the trenches,
not talking about it,
but actually
pontificators, these people that are bloggers, and a lot of respect for those guys, but they talk about it. They never actually implemented or operated a recruiting department, an HR department, anything like that.
100% agree.
Yep.
So
there's a lot. Because what has happened, sorry, Steve, in the HR tech startup space is that they started hiring some of these bloggers as their CMOs and chiefs of strategy and board advisors. And they're smart people, don't get me wrong, but they're not in the trenches. They're not hiring 400 people at Oscar, 300 of which were customer service reps, which has got to be an insane amount of resumes that you looked at.
the trick was to help the team that was recruiting for it actually set up a system that they could run themselves. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it's clear to me that we can automate a bunch of things of what we're spending our time on day to day.
See, but automating just means, quite frankly, and I have to jump in here, because
you knew that you would.
You knew that was going to happen. The problem with tools and platforms that automate existing processes is the assumption that the existing process is ideal, it's optimal, etc.
You said recruiting's not broke. So if it's not broke, you should just layer on all the automation.
Yeah, no, it's not broken. It's really suboptimal in some places.
True.
Really suboptimal.
So, all right. So we're great discussion, and I agree. Maybe we'll have Yann back on, and we'll talk about HR technology. And it's absolutely. So we're gonna go. So Yann, you're a busy recruiter for really high-profile companies. Can't take lunch, so you got to go out. You got to grab a couple of slices and a can of Coke. Where are you going? What's your favorite pizza by the slice location? New York, best pizza in the world. You can, get it anywhere.
Well, actually, Yann, before you answer this, is there a certain food from home that you have found here in New York City?
Yeah, it's called beer.
Nice.
I don't think we've ever heard. I don't think
it's popular.
Do you have your favorite New York brand of beer?
Oh, that's a good question.
Flagship. It's got to be.
No. I'm really a lagers and pilsners and Hefeweizen person. I like the Brooklyn Lager. Honestly, is just fine, and yeah, I'm not too picky though. I probably should.
Have you been out to Bohemian Hall in Astoria?
No. It's on the list.
Okay, I will do that. Have you had any of the Montauk brands of beer?
Oh God.
Oh yeah, those are good too.
Hey, is there any Staten Island beer, Anthony? I don't want to keep you out of the discussion. Is there anything?
Flagship is killing it right now.
I've never heard of Flagship. I should
never. I don't
try
know
it. You should try it. It's better than that piss water in Montauk. But let's pizza by the slice.
Pizza by the slice. Yeah, pizza by the slice.
Carroll Gardens on Court Street has Sal's Pizza.
Yep.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Manhattan. That's first time out of Manhattan.
I like that.
Very nice.
Sal's is good.
Sal's Pizza. Carroll.
Is it plain? What you load it up with stuff? How do you like it, Yann? You like a German style with lots of sausage on it?
Anchovies, olives, capers. I love it. That's great. Okay.
Nice.
And what about bagels? You know, New York bagels.
Here we go.
Bite me.
You know, so not to make this too uncomfortable here, but I'll definitely prefer pizza over bagels any day.
Okay, I see which political way you lean to.
Enough said. Enough said. Enough said. Yeah, we're gonna end it. We're gonna end it there.
We'll end it right there.
We're gonna end it right there. Perfect ending. Yann, thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you and refer some directors of urban mobility or whatever it is you're recruiting over there, I mean, you must have
you talk about a job title you've never even heard about, and you're trying to sound, bring that level of erudition up much higher than this show requires.
Whatever it is you're recruiting for, how do people reach out to you?
LinkedIn's great.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the
Steve loves LinkedIn. It's his favorite platform.
It's my favorite platform for showing. Women love it because it's how they get dates these days.
What do you call it? In-mall? You get?
Oh yeah, the process of sending out. I'm sure you've gotten them, Yann. You've gotten in malls from recruiters. They see one word in your profile and they say, "Oh, would you like to be a software developer?" That's called in-malling.
In-malling.
Yeah. Good. Sorry.
No, and because of all the women who have unfortunately have received propositions on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is also referred to as kinked in for that reason as well.
Anyway, we should have stopped at the bagel.
No, I think it was the bagel. I had to go beyond the bagel.
Yeah. Yann, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.
Have a good one.
See you soon.